I've been there.
Oh my gosh, I appreciate that.
We live in your village.
Thank you.
Orange County.
Yeah, we live in the same neighborhood.
Oh, yeah.
I went to
So you never
grad
got
school. Yeah. I turned your phone over because it kept looking at me, and I didn't want to accidentally read your text messages.
Well, good morning, everyone. Good morning. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Sarah McBride. I'm the National Press Secretary at the Human Rights Campaign and a proud transgender woman. I am really excited for this morning's conversation. I want to begin by thanking a few folks and a few organizations. Obviously, I am surrounded by incredible parent advocates, members of the Human Rights Campaign's Parents for Transgender Equality National Council. These are some of the nation's leading parent advocates on the front lines of the fight for transgender equality, and so we are privileged and honored to have them here with us today to share a little bit about their stories and the urgent need for pro-equality legislation and to defeat the attacks by the Trump-Pence administration on transgender people. I want to thank my friend and an incredible ally to the LGBTQ community, particularly the transgender community, Representative Joe Kennedy, the chair of the Congressional Transgender Equality Task Force. Let's give him a round of applause. I want to thank the Congressional LGBT Equality Caucus for helping to organize this event and securing us this room, and for all of the incredible work that they do. So thank you so much to representatives from the caucus. I want to thank the members of Congress who are here. Representative Kennedy is going to speak and then allow you all to introduce yourselves as well. But thank you so much for joining us. And so with that, I'd love to turn things over to a true champion of equality, Representative Joe Kennedy.
Everybody, just thanks for coming, Sarah. So to HRC, thank you for pulling all of this together. Incredible work that you all have been doing year after year after year, and I'm honored to be your partner in this. I have had the honor over the course of the past several years to do a couple events with Sarah. It's always a thrill. She's a rock star, and so thanks for doing this one too.
Thank you, pal.
To the parents that are here, this is more than anything an opportunity for members of Congress to hear your stories. I know many of you around this table. I hope to get to know more of you around this table. In my own kind of story on LGBT and trans advocacy, your stories have been some of the most impactful for me. So I think more and more members of Congress need to hear them, and that's what the point of today is, really a listening session for them. So to that end, 2 points. Vote schedule has been updated a bit, so 9:45 to 10:15 first votes. We were hoping to budget an hour. I got here late with the coffee. That's my bad. But what I want to do is to kick it to my colleagues to introduce themselves. We're going to be real quick because this is a chance to let these parents speak. So name where you're from in one other sentence that people should know. Like, we're on it. Chris.
Chris Pappas from New Hampshire. Pleasure to be with you all. I think what hit home for me as a new candidate running for Congress this past year, as an out candidate running for Congress, is that telling our stories is the way that we change hearts, minds, and laws. And so you all being here, the advocacy work that you do is going to move mountains. And the generational change that we're seeing is going to arrive a lot quicker because of the work that you're doing for the family members and people in your lives.
I'm Jan Chakowski. I represent the 9th District of Illinois. I brought a picture. I'm very proud. This is Izzy, as of this week, Isaac, who is my transgender grandson.
Oh.
And I just wanted to say thank you to the advocates and all who have come before you. This is, I think we're coming up on a Stonewall anniversary. People who have suffered and fought and made the world a safe place for my grandson.
I'm Alan Lowenthal, California. I'm on 47th Congressional District. I just want to thank HRC and I want to thank my colleague Joe Kennedy for doing this. And I'm just here to listen. Thank you so much.
Wow, sorry. Hi, I'm Sean Maloney. I'm from New York, and it's wonderful to be with you all, and we're here to listen to you. Thanks.
My name's Jennifer. I don't know if this is even working.
Yeah.
I'm Jennifer Wexton. I'm from Northern Virginia. I'm a brand new member of Congress, and you guys may know me as the person who hung the trans flag outside my house. And I did that because, you know, trans rights are human rights. We're talking about my friends and my family, and I really feel that they've been under attack. The community has been under attack, and we're on the leading edge of the next civil rights movement when it comes to trans equality and understanding. And I want to thank you guys so much for what you're doing, because the more kids that feel safe to be who they are and come out as who they are, the better it's going to be for everybody in our country. So thank you so much for everything you're doing, and keep it up.
Well, thank you again for joining us today. As Representative Kennedy mentioned, stories are incredibly powerful in making change, and they've really been the fuel through which we have made so much change over the last several decades on LGBTQ equality. And like I said at the start, the parents who are sitting around this table and around the room have been sharing their stories at school board meetings and state legislatures, and of course in the halls of Congress. And they are the reason why we have seen so much progress when it comes to social acceptance. We've just finished up a two-day summit at the Human Rights Campaign headquarters with these parents, talking about their experiences, talking about the needs of their families, talking about their journeys, and talking about the strategies and priorities moving forward in the fight for equality. And you know, I'll just start by saying that one of the major issues that we are hearing time and time again is the clear need for explicit non-discrimination protections for LGBTQ people throughout daily life. And we're excited that in the coming weeks, the Equality Act will be reintroduced. That is legislation that is not just life-affirming, but life-saving for many of these families and their children. And so with that, I'd love to turn it over to our first parent, an incredible advocate from Texas, Rachel.
Thank you, Sarah. Good morning. My name is Rachel Gonzalez. I am the Education and Resource Coordinator for Equality Texas. Thank you so much, Representative Kennedy and members of Congress, for being here today. It means so much. I just wanted to take a couple of minutes to tell you about my family. I am the mother of 3. All my children's birthdays are clustered together, and so next week starts birthday season, and I'm on the verge of having a 4-year-old son, Henry, and a 6-year-old daughter, Cecilia, and a 9-year-old daughter, Libby. I think that, like a lot of parents, my husband and I didn't really know what we were getting into when we had our first baby, but what we really did not expect is that we would be on a journey to support our transgender daughter. So our oldest daughter, Libby, just became progressively anxious and depressed and angry, and she was this super outgoing and happy child that my husband and I were really at odds on how to handle her increasing need to feminize her presence. And as she became more aware of other people's perception of her as a boy, she just hit a wall where she expressed to us that she could not go on any longer with anyone thinking that she was a boy, that she needed Santa Claus to turn her into a girl. It was right after Christmas. And
At what age?
at age 5. So it had been about 2 years of really expressing that she was a girl. But it wasn't quite so explicit for those first 2 years, so it was just this anxiety and depression and anger where she was lashing out at school, lashing out at home. And once we allowed her to socially transition, meaning that she started wearing stereotypical girls' clothing, dresses and skirts, and growing her hair out, which we had already stopped cutting long before that because she was fervently against it, she became happier, and we changed her name and her pronouns, and she started to come back out of that dark cloud. And we were really anxious about living in Texas, what that would be like, telling her classmates at school that her name and pronouns had changed. And much to our surprise, her classmates' responses were almost comical. Of course she's wearing a dress. Why wouldn't she wear a dress? Of course her name is Libby. Her classmates knew who she was, because they spent every day with her. Parents were super supportive. So we're really, really fortunate. As difficult as it has been, especially living in a state like Texas, we have a really supportive community in Dallas. And that's not the case for a lot of families around the state, which is why we really need clear protections for all LGBTQ identified individuals, but especially youth, because it's a really scary place to sit as a parent when you know that your child is being attacked. So thank you so much for being here and listening to our stories and sitting around the table. It really speaks to my heart. Thank you so much.
Very quickly, 3 more members of Congress popped in. Name where you're from and 1 sentence. That's it.
And I'm sorry.
Chicago, it's warmer here.
Mary J. Scanlon, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, city of brotherly love and sisterly affection.
Mark Chicano, Riverside, California. This is between Los Angeles and Palm Springs. Please speak.
And just as a flag, we've got a microphone that my wonderful colleague Charlie has, and while it doesn't help in the room, it helps. We are live streaming this, so if you do want to be heard, please wait for Charlie to come around with the microphone.
Thank you.
Louis?
Good morning, Representative Kennedy, members of the Congressional Transgender Equality Task Force, ladies and gentlemen. I really appreciate the opportunity to share our story. My wife, E, and I struggled with fertility issues, so at midlife, when we became parents, we were over the moon. Our child was assigned female at birth, and many of my colleagues at the table share stories of their children knowing very early on that they were not born in the right body, that they were transgender, and finding the language for that. Our story is a little different in that Zeem, a family friend described Zeem as all girl. And I remember her name was Leah at birth. And I remember talking Leah into having Shirley Temple curls, because every dad wants his daughter with Shirley Temple curls and all of that. And it was in middle school when Zeem told us that they were queer. And I'm so thankful that what flew out of my mouth was loving. I said, well, honey, your dad's love comes with a lifetime guarantee. Then in high school, as a sophomore, Zeem told us that they were trans. And Zeem identifies as non-binary, gender expansive. And so that means that on one day, Zeem could evoke Beyonce, and on the next day, evoke Prince. Zeem is as likely to raid my closet as their mother's closet. So the whole gender expansive thing is something that we've had to help people understand and help people through. One of the things that surprised us was that the many people who were supportive, elders in our family, and I'm from the Black Southern Christian tradition, and so for an elder in my family to be supportive says a lot. My godmother, people at church, they were very supportive as well, for the most part. We, every now and then, encounter some ignorance and some hate and some lack of understanding, but organizations such as the Human Rights Campaign's Parents for Transgender Equality Council and other groups have really helped us with support and understanding and just being able to talk to someone who shares our common journey. I haven't met a parent yet who doesn't worry, but when your child is transgender and Black, you worry even more so. This is why the Equality Act is so important, because it will make a difference for the safety and the equity and the right to live with dignity for all our children. But before I close, I want to emphasize that the major acts, the congressional changes and the new laws are important. But I also want to encourage everyone to remember those everyday things, that interrupting a joke, interrupting ignorance, sharing that you know a transgender person and the humanity of that transgender person. At the water cooler, do people still talk at the water cooler, right? At the water cooler, at lunch, over coffee, in those everyday acts, because those everyday acts lead to human understanding. And that's what leads to the laws that can change and transform this country into what it can be and what it must be, especially now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. My name is Priya Shah, and my husband is here with us as well. And just want to really thank Representative Kennedy for bringing us here today. When you spoke about transgender families of transgender children in your speech, that was actually this day last year, because it showed up in my memories, we started crying because it's been a journey, and it sometimes you feel very alone, especially with the current kind of political situation, and I thank all of you for being here today. Our daughter, who was identified male at birth, came to me before her 7th birthday, looked me straight in the eye and said, "Mom, I'm a girl." Like, this is the situation. And in a way, yeah, it was like, this is what it is. But in a way, I think we had known that for a long time and that it was coming, but we were very scared of what that might mean. And when we started going to a therapist, the very first time we went, she said, "I knew since I was 4, but I thought you would hate me. And I thought people wouldn't love me anymore. And all we've ever wanted to do for our children is love them." And I know that that's the same for every family here. But they're hearing these things that before, she didn't even know the word transgender. She didn't know that it was a thing that you could be. And she was so scared to even tell her family. So, we started this journey together with her older sister, who was so accepting and, just didn't even need a minute. But it was a journey, and we were even though we live in California, we were at a private school where ultimately they said she could not transition. She was a straight A student, really well behaved, the best kind of kid you could ask for, but she had to go in a male uniform, use her old name, use her old pronouns, and she would come home every day after school and rip the uniform off. And one day I found a picture of her that was taken at school, and she had ripped it in half and said, "I hate myself." And we took her out of school that night. That was a really pivotal moment for our family, and I started homeschooling, left my business, started homeschooling. Because even in California, we didn't know what to do, and we were not going to lose our baby. We decided to sue the school because we didn't want any family to go through this ever again. And we worked with our public school for 6 months. We begged and we pleaded and we shared our story, and they actually changed their school board policy. And they started training the principals. And she got into the gifted and talented program, straight A kid who loves school and loves her friends and is just a happy, thriving person. But when she heard about the trans military ban, my dad had left the TV on, and she heard, and it was just like the color went out of her face. And she said, "Why do they hate us so much?" And so, it's a constant battle. We still have parents in Orange County who want to be able to discriminate against transgender children. There's teachers who ask if they cannot teach our kids. And so something like the Equality Act, I think, would help everybody know that our kids are protected and they can grow and thrive just like what we want for every other child. And so I just, from the bottom of our hearts, we thank you for listening.
All right, I'm going to try and keep it together. Representative Kennedy, thank you so much for leading this group. Thank you, members of Congress, for being here and listening to our voices and our stories. Each story that you find here will be unique, but also the same in that we all love our children. We will die for our children. And all we want is the best for our children in this country. My name is J.R. Ford. My wife Vanessa and I, we have two beautiful children, Ronnie, who is 9, Ellie, who will be 8 in about a month. We first hailed from D.C. We love D.C., but now we hail in the great Commonwealth. So I think we're in good hands. Our story really begins in D.C., where our daughter Ellie transitioned just after her 4th birthday. And she was running upstairs with my wife, Vanessa, and my wife said, "Well, aren't you just my beautiful princess boy?" And Ellie stopped and said, "No, Mom, I'm a girl in my heart and in my brain." From that day forward, it set us on a new path, a beautiful path. It wasn't the path that we envisioned, but this new path has opened up so many doors for us. It has led us to our new family, who you see in front of you, as well as those who are not here. So we feel that we have the power, we have the platform to fight for those who don't. On her 4th birthday, it really did challenge us on how much we could love our child. During our 2-day workshop, it really did help me understand that everyone in this room loves their child beyond comprehension. And, it's led us to be vocal advocates. All of us here are in a relatively safe space, that we feel comfortable enough to share our stories publicly, but that doesn't mean that we don't face adversity. We did fight for the Yes on 3 campaign, and we won. But that doesn't, we won big. But that doesn't mean that our fight stops there. The Equality Act would help to provide that protection across the entire nation for transgender youth and adults, so that they could know that they exist. We can't leverage state by state regulations and policies. It's just not the way to go. It's more beneficial for all children in this country to be protected. And so the Equality Act really is essential for essential human rights. We shouldn't have to do this, but we have to do this. So I thank you all for listening to our stories, listening to the voices that we have here, our powerful voices that we have in this room. And I look forward to working with you all in the future. So thank you.
Thank you, Representative Kennedy and the Congressional Transgender Task Force for Equality. This is really an amazing opportunity as a parent to be able to share. My name is Ashley Rhodes Corder. I'm a social worker and an author from Florida. We are the parents of 3 children who are 4, 6, and 6. Our eldest child was adopted from foster care. My husband and I were foster parents for many years, and we've cared for more than 25 children, and we're fortunate enough to be able to adopt one. And we very quickly realized that our child, who had been assigned male at birth, was very unique and very special. A huge turning point for us came when we got a call from the school in preschool. At 4 years old, they were playing on the playground, and the teacher says, "Okay, boys and girls, we're going to go inside. Girls in this line, boys in the other." Our child stood in the middle and said, "Where do I go?" And that was a 4-year-old. And for us, that was unbelievably powerful. So immediately we were confused. We started researching, reaching out to professionals, reaching out to the mental health community, the medical community. But through it all, my husband and I have been very affirming and very welcoming. But sadly, in my work as a social worker, as both a parent and a social worker, I'm seeing blatant and frankly unethical discrimination in the child welfare field in particular, where families are being barred from becoming foster or adoptive families families, the children, they end up essentially homeless because they don't have parents who will accept them as foster placements. It's not guaranteed that every child will get a bed just because they're adjudicated into the foster care system. And simply based on their identity or sexual preference, they're discriminated against. We've faced issues receiving medical care and receiving just basic services for our child's academic progress, but it's also really heartbreaking to see other families struggling so intently to create loving homes for children that would otherwise have no voice, and I think that's completely irresponsible and unacceptable. As you return to your communities and your advocacy, I hope that you will reflect upon this panel and remember and realize that, as JR said, our children do exist and they deserve to exist. But more importantly, our plea as parents to all of you is to please help us secure legal protections for our children, because our current laws and policies nationally have some pretty big gaps. And it's our hope that our voices will help fill those gaps, and we hope to inspire all of you to help create change for thousands of underserved families and children who are disproportionately discriminated against for ridiculous reasons. Thank you.
Can everyone hear me okay? Good morning. My name is Keisha Michaels, and I am so thankful to be here. We are really appreciative of the opportunity to speak to you, Representative Kennedy, and the other members of Congress who are here. We are just grateful to be able to tell our stories. We have diverse stories. So all of us are parents of children who are trans or non-binary, but each of us kind of got to this place a different way. So I just want to share with you my story and my husband's story. My husband and I are, we are progressives. Like, when we got married, we've always felt like healthcare was right, and, everyone should have access to it, and insurance, and, my husband is very interested in the environment and the earth, and every time I buy paper plates, he says, I'll wash the plates. It's like, you are killing the earth. I mean, literally, I have to hear this in my head, you're killing the earth. So, what do you do with a progressive family? When you have 2 children, you start expanding your numbers. And we had a son, and then we had a second child who was assigned male at birth. And we thought, oh, this is great. And I thought, ooh, I'm the queen of the house, and I mean, like, I don't, it's like all these, all this testosterone. It was great. And what we noticed pretty much right away was that our younger child was never a boy. I have to just be honest with you. Before our child could talk, she was telling us, gravitating toward things that were pretty much all girl. All feminine, toys, clothes. We'd be in Target and she'd like waddle off into literally. And I'm like, what are you doing over here? And we kind of didn't know what to do with that. But again, remember, we're progressive, right? So I'm like, oh, she wants to wear pink PJs. That's great. We can do all this at home, right? Like, we won't do it outside. We'll keep everything internal. And that'll kind of satisfy, her interest in all things girl. Who knows? Maybe it's passing. You have to support where they are. All these things that you hear. So we thought we were doing okay. And what we noticed was that over time, we were losing her bit by bit. She was telling us that she was not a boy. And we had this firm belief that, it's like one thing we really believed in was that you're perfect the way you are, right? That is something that we tell all of our children. You are perfect the way you are. Your hair, whatever your hair color, whatever your eye color, whoever you are. And I have to say, this is the one time when that doesn't work. So we tried that, and she just stopped talking about it. She stopped telling us that she was not who we thought she was. And she became this bitter, kind of angry, not so easy to deal with. Some kids are easy, some kids are not. And she was on the not so easy side for a while. And we figured out we had to do something. We were really at a crossroads. Like, I cannot lose this child. I'm a pediatrician by training. So I started hearing her tell us she wanted to die. She'd verbalize it. She had no idea how to execute it, I don't think, but in her heart, she did not want to live the way she was living. So we had a decision to make, right? I mean, I can go through all the details about how we got there, but at the end of the day, we had a decision to make. And we decided that we were going to choose her. And we were going to choose her life. The road leading up to her transition was between ages 8 and 10. So she transitioned at 10. By 8, she had stopped talking about it. So we heard a lot, ages 3, 4, 5, and then she just kind of got real quiet for the next few years. So that's kind of the timeline for us. So we decided to do that. And I have to tell you, I have not really seen with my own eyes a child become alive. Literally, the day we told her that we were going to support her in her transition, I've never seen that face. I'm not sure I've seen it since. She's happy. She's well-adjusted. We now have a teenager who is responsible for her own schoolwork. We don't have to harp on her about homework. She does it by herself. She's very smart. She's into bath bombs and American Girl, slime, Minecraft. I mean, like, this is what we have to hear. And so the things that we struggle with now are just typical parent things. Like, she is a typical teenager, and we love her so. Anyway, so I'm just so appreciative that we've gotten to this place. And I guess what I would like to leave you guys with is, we worry. We know the numbers. We know the statistics. We realize that transgender women of color, particularly Black transgender women, are murdered. I'll just have to say it, at ridiculous rates in this country. And we worry. My husband and I worry every day about it. But, sorry. Today, we just appreciate everyone's efforts to help make this place safe for her and other people like her. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here. My name is Jessica Gervin, and I'm the mother of a beautiful 13-year-old transgender daughter. But I'm also a military spouse. My husband has been in the Air Force for 15 plus years. When my daughter Blue came out as transgender, we were living in Germany. We had been there for about 8 years at that point. She went to a Department of Defense school, and because there was no consistent policy at her elementary school, she was the first out transgender elementary school student the school and the school board had ever seen. At her school, the superintendent decided that she was not allowed to use either the boys' or the girls' restroom outside of her class. She had to walk down 3 flights of stairs, leave the building, cross a courtyard, enter another building, and go down the end of the building to use the bathroom. She was denied health care. We didn't know what to do. We were stuck. As a military family, you don't get to choose where you live. We go where the government needs us. Because there was no consistent policy across the parking lot at the middle school at our same base, there was an inclusive policy. So transgender kids there could use the bathroom. This is repeated at bases around the world. Because of my daughter's story, the Assistant Secretary of Defense under Obama issued an inclusive, affirming policy at all Department of Defense schools and MWR facilities around the world. For the first time, families didn't have to worry, what happens when we move? What happens during the next PCS season? Will my child lose health care? Will my child not be able to go to school? Will we be able to rent a house? We had this beautiful policy for 4 months. It was one of the first things that was rescinded under this new administration. Military families like mine, we just want to focus on the mission. We want to serve our country. We don't want to worry about are our kids safe? Our service members who are deployed in hostile countries are sometimes more worried about, is their child safe, than if they're going to get shot. A little over a year ago, with the help of Representative Kennedy and nearly every single member of our home state of New Mexico's congressional delegation, we were able to move. We were able to move to Maryland, where my daughter now has an incredibly affirming school. She has amazing health care. She has civil rights protections. But if we have to move again, she could lose it all. I'm sorry. Service members don't want to have to choose between leaving the military and protecting their children. We need comprehensive, inclusive policies. Human rights should not be based on your zip code. Thank you.
Well, thank you for sharing your stories. And I say this to parents of transgender young people like yourselves, and I know it should go without saying, but thank you for loving your children. I would love to open it up for any questions that members have, but I did want to specifically ask one question of a couple of our parents, because we have seen over the last few years at the state and federal level, transgender people, particularly transgender young people, find themselves under attack. Whether it's a administration that rescinds life-saving guidance promoting the protection of transgender students, whether it's a tweeted transgender ban on transgender troops, or whether it's efforts in states to rescind or roll back or license discrimination, these families have had to face governments that were targeting their young people, their children, for discrimination. And so one of the things that I think really helps to highlight the need for nationwide protections are these governmental attacks. And so I'd love to hear from some of the parents here who have faced these efforts, whether by state legislatures, by the president, or even by a small group of anti-LGBTQ activists in the state of Massachusetts that tried to put protections on the ballot and fortunately failed miserably. I'd really like to hear how those experiences inform your belief that there needs to be clear protections nationwide. So Rachel, if you'd like to begin.
Sure, thank you. So one of the things that we really didn't expect when we had a transgender child is that was going to come with a very public debate about whether or not our child deserves basic dignity in the state of Texas. I know we ended up at the center of that battle because we have a really supportive community and because I'm a Taurus. Let's be real. I'm not going to let you run over my child. But we had no idea how public that was going to be. We had no idea how painful it was going to be. And I testified 3 times in the state of Texas in 2017 against the bathroom bill, in the Senate, in the House, and then again in the Senate in the special session. And one of those times was at 2 a.m. And then my daughter actually testified at age 7 in the special session. And it is not easy to have to trek from Dallas to Austin when you have 3 small children. I usually had my 2-year-old strapped to my back because 2-year-olds. But it was a really intense and painful situation that we were willing and absolutely going to fight for, but not every family in Texas has that ability to drop everything and go to the Capitol. When we testified in the special, we were on our way to our summer vacation with our kids, and there was a moment where my 2 younger children were underneath the table where I was testifying, and all of a sudden the iPad just starts blasting music, because that's life as a parent. But families like mine are looking to legislators and hoping to find allies, but instead they're finding bullies and people that are using their children as political pawns. And that's obscene. It's why we really, really have to have clear, explicit, nationwide protections for everyone in the LGBTQ community, including my daughter.
Jen, I don't want to put you on the spot, but did you want to, Jen, I don't want to put you on the spot, but did you want to share a bit about your grandson or your?
No. My story and our family story is a little different, and in some ways maybe easier, because while Isabel was always a tomboy, she came out as gay when she was in her junior and senior year of high school, and then went to McAllister, where he's at now. Someone else, McAllister? Okay. Oh, okay. And McAllister, and told us then that he was transitioning, that when he went back after a vacation, that it was going to be Izzy, not Isabel, Izzy, he. And now, as I said earlier, he's chosen not just a nickname, but now it's Isaac, and we're excited about that. So I was thinking, I asked him, I said, so growing up, was this an issue for you? Because our family's very close. He always seemed very happy. He said, I just never knew it was an option. And, you know, I felt loved and accepted in the family. I asked him, how do you feel about the family photos? You know, that show him, of course, he was never wearing a dress, so could be anything, I guess. But I think about the decisions. Some of you talked about decisions. We had no decisions. Izzy is now going to be 21. On his 21st birthday, he'll have breast removal surgery, and he's very excited about that as part of the transition. He had eggs frozen, which I thought was an interesting decision on his part, so that he could be a parent of his own child. But in a way, I feel like for us, the transition was just being accepting. It was not making decisions that a lot of these families, and facing the kind of problems. In Evanston, Illinois, we wouldn't have faced those kinds of problems. I'm infuriated about the military, and I'm sure Representative Takano, who's head of the Veterans Affairs and the head of our Anyway, so that's our family. In some ways, it was an easier journey, still a journey.
Thank you for sharing. Would anyone else like to?
Mr. Quigley.
First, sorry this is happening to you in the United States of America, and sorry to your children. It's going to get better, and we're all committed to that. The only thing I want to stress is you all are talking about the Equality Act, which is a cornerstone that we have to accomplish, but equality can take place in a lot of different ways, and these battles are going to be in a lot of different committees. You just referenced that some of us serve in other, because appropriations is absolutely critical. How you spend money is policy, and the restrictions that can be put on there, for just one example. It's just, so I encourage everyone here and those who are watching, be aware of all those battles that are taking place. It's not a magic bullet, it's buckshot, but
Yeah.
please, I know you won't give up, and neither will we. Thank you.
I just wanted to say one last thing. The transgender troop ban has put a target on the back of not only service members, but also the transgender dependents of service members. What happens to the military directly affects the children and the spouses. And it's something that's not really being discussed. So thank you.
It will be.
Thank you.
Do any members have any other questions or comments that they'd like to make? Thank you.
Microphones are behind you. Pass it over. Yeah, it was.
I too want to express my my sorrow, and I'm just sorry that that you're having to endure this terrible moment. And just know that in the Department of Veterans Affairs, that former trans-military service members are able to get the medical care. I don't want to say too much or make too big a deal out of it, because I don't want the department to become a focus of the administration. So I just know that the VA does practice medicine and care for people for who they are, and so I'm proud of that. But I'm also mindful, and I'm sure that my colleague, Mr. Maloney, has something to say about what could be done about the Department of Defense. But frankly, we just need to make sure we get the Equality Act across the finish line in the House. And who knows? I mean, you can constantly be surprised. I was surprised that there was a Speaker of the House in Texas who's a Republican, who was a firewall. And I thought for sure that this wedge issue was going to be successful in places like North Carolina and even Indiana. And we saw support for trans people come from, unlikely places. The business community really stepped forward. So we're truly at a different place in terms of fighting for equality for everybody. And but I'm inspired by all of your stories, and it was really, really important for someone like me who's already an ally to hear your stories. And I can tell you, you're going to really make a big difference by continuing to present your stories to the general public. So thank you.
Thank you.
So I've come to this place in my prior life. I worked with legal services agencies. So for the past 5-6 years, been working with legal services agencies around the country to help transgender youth change their names so that they didn't have that daily opportunity for discrimination. And also participating in bathroom cases in different states, and working in Pennsylvania, because although Philadelphia is very welcoming to the LGBTQ community, the whole state does not have a law that protects them. But just listening to the stories, and it's kind of why I ended up running for Congress, is because we can't just be on defense all the time, right? We need the Equality Act. We need these broader protections so that when your child grows up and moves from Maryland to Texas or to someplace else, that they're free to do so, and so that people don't have to change their names to be safe. So I really, really thank you all for the work that you're doing and for inspiring me to work harder. Thanks.
The one thing I will add is, with the new Congress and the new House, you all have the fire being lit underneath you. You have the momentum going into 2019, into 2020 to make a difference. This would make an incredible difference to this country. It would set a standard of equality for everyone, just not the transgender and gender nonconforming community, but it sets a precedent for everyone to know, even across the world, that the United States is considering everyone, not just a slice of the community, but everyone as equals in this country, and for our military service members as well and their families. So I implore you to continue to fight, continue to push. Right now we are in a disruption campaign. And I say that both positively for us and negatively for this administration. It has lit a fire underneath all of us, and we will continue to push, and we really do appreciate our time here and hoping that you all will continue to move the fight forward for us. So thank you.
So I do want to just say that I'm really listening to all of you as a parent. I mean, I have 3 kids, and first of all, you know, just way to go, moms and dads. You guys are amazing. So give yourselves a little credit. This is not easy, and I know, you know, it's probably not what you envisioned your lives would be like, right? And my husband and I have been raising kids for 25 years, and I can guarantee you in 1993 it was very unusual for 2 gay men to be raising children. We were adoptive parents, and our kids are multiracial, and so we cross a lot of lines of difference. And the one thing I have become very sure of is that we are living in the best of times and the worst of times, right? And that when the Hartzler Amendment came up in the House floor a couple years back, which some of you know about, you certainly probably knew about it, which would have deprived military service members of health care, transgender, and family members. You know, incredibly, the morning that came up, it was kind of assumed in the morning whip meeting among the Democrats that we didn't have a chance in hell of stopping it. And in a couple hours, some of us on the floor got 24 Republicans to vote with us and stop the Hartzler Amendment. 24 Republicans in the last Congress, and we won, right? You know, look at you, you know that. And so I can tell you that I have just seen, and I joke about this because I was literally saying to conservative members, running around in the last minute, you can do this. You know, it's just taxpayer-funded gender reassignment surgery in the military. Don't worry about it. And they would say that is literally my worst nightmare. And yet 24 of them came with us, right? And so I know that we're going to pass the Equality Act in this Congress. I'm really interested to see how big a majority we can get for the Equality Act and how many Republicans will vote with us, because it sure as hell ought to be more than 24. Now, some of those folks were moderates and lost their seats. That's the way it works around here. But we should get a bipartisan vote for this legislation, the Equality Act, and I'm very encouraged by that. And I want you guys to know, as a parent, that I think your children are going to grow up in a country that is accepting and loving of them. And it's not going to be a straight line. None of this stuff goes in a straight line. But you should feel very hopeful about the world that you're helping to create, because there's going to be room for all of us in it. I really believe that firmly. And I say that as a parent with 25 years of experience of watching this system open itself to us. You know, there is probably no group of Americans that should be more optimistic about American democracy than LGBT people, because this system is working for us. It is working because we worked, and because of our straight allies like Joe and so many of the rest of you in this room. But it is working for us, and it's going to work for your kids. And so just keep at it and don't lose faith. And we're going to be right there fighting with you.
You know, I have a lot of feelings, you know, going through today, but the one predominant one is how much love there is in this room, how much support. And that makes me feel very good. It makes me feel like we're all connected, we're all part of a society that really cares about our children, loves our children. And we're living through, at the same point, a nightmare of an administration. You know, I just left in the meeting earlier this morning with Jan, with an administration that wants to separate parents from children. So this is all part of what we're all fighting for. But I'm just so pleased to be here and to be around so much love. It really means a lot to me. Thank you all.
We should start every day in Congress.
If I could add just one more thing, you know, we've been under attack for 2 years. Ever since this administration changed over, it has been a constant battle for us to help ensure that our children are protected. From the rescindance on the Title IX guidance, when I stood in front of the White House yelling my head off, to us doing lobby days, to ensure that you all hear us. With the Equality Act, part of that fight stops. So I really do implore you to push your other congressmen, your other representatives, your colleagues, to sign on to this, to continue the fight, because the administration now does not have our children's best interests, and it's inexcusable, it's unconscionable, and it sickens me and it disheartens me, and probably all of us in here, that we have to continue to fight at a national level to make sure that our children and our friends exist. So I close out with that, and thank you all for being here and listening to our stories.
And I know we're hearing the bells for a vote, but before we close out with a couple remarks from Representative Kennedy, JR and I were talking yesterday about how after those 2 years of constant attacks from the administration, and while we'll see many more, all of these families are breathing a sigh of relief now that there's a pro-equality majority in the U.S. House of Representatives and pro-equality leadership. And so we want to thank you as a Parents' Council, as the Human Rights Campaign, for being part of that pro-equality majority, of being leaders in that pro-equality majority, and that for the last several years and for several years more, you all will be incredibly important voices that help change hearts and open minds in this country. We saw a poll yesterday that when American voters were asked whether transgender people should be able to serve openly in the military, 70% said yes, 22% said no. That is an incredible supermajority in this country, and that's a testament to the courage and the compassion of members of Congress from both parties who've spoken out, from these parents who have shared their stories, and because of people like Representative Kennedy for their leadership. So with that, I'd love to turn things over to Representative Kennedy.
Sarah, thanks. I'll be brief with just a couple of comments. And echoing, I think, what a lot of what my colleagues have already said. So first off, incredibly proud to be in this room with you. Honored that you all are here and have made the time to come here. Heartbroken that you have to do it. Even in today's day and age, and at some point, I've now been around Congress long enough to hear people quote our founding documents and talk about freedom and equality, and know that in our nation's history, when we talk about all men being created equal, we meant rich, white, Protestant men, and that was it. And that it's taken us a couple hundred years, but that definition of men is slowly but surely expanding. But it is only expanding because people are willing to fight for it, and people have fought for it. But it is a story of our country to be that ever more perfect place. At some point, and I think sooner rather than later, we will be able to meet that goal of those words that are actually etched in stone above the Supreme Court about equal justice under law. And Sean, if you'll forgive me, one of the seminal moments I've had as a member of Congress was at your wedding that I was about 4 hours late to because my car broke down. So sorry on the first part. But watching a very close friend be able to have his relationship recognized by our government after being together for 25 plus years. And what Sean said is, it still sticks with me. It's an amazing thing when you see your government catch up to you. The idea that our government is still struggling to catch up to a parent's love for a child is an awfully hard thing for somebody involved in government to accept and to try to square, given the words that come out of a House chamber and out of our government and about freedom and equality and the greatest democracy on earth, yet we still can't quite recognize the dignity of a child and the promise of a child and the respect of a parent's love for their child. And I am so grateful that all of you are here and for the work that you have done on all of these campaigns, local and national, on all these efforts. I am so sorry that the burden often gets placed on you all, and even more so on these extraordinarily, often tiny but incredibly strong shoulders that are forced to bear this fight. I will say, though, that building off of what Sean said, we are making progress because you're sharing your stories, because even for some of the most conservative members, if we could get them into a room like this to hear your stories, I don't know how you cannot be moved by what you've said. And so, unfortunately, there's an ask coming to all of you. For those of you that shared your stories here, thank you. For the many others that have stories that are just as powerful. And for your children, for Jacob and for Blue and for countless others. Please keep sharing them, because it is the only way that we are able to break down those barriers. It is the only way that we're able to create allies and to make sure that people actually understand the consequence of what this level of a segregated society still, what it means for a child. And I don't know how, as a policymaker, you can possibly defend that. When you hear about the impact for your grandson, right? I don't know how you do that. So thank you. Grateful.